The South African Guild of Actors has once again drawn attention to the plight of actors, performers and crew in open letters addressed to the Minister of Arts and Culture and other stakeholders in the entertainment industry. The Guild says the lack of regulation in the sector has led to the exploitation of multiple creatives, and it's become a norm. In two open letters posted online, the Guild has again appealed to the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Gayton McKenzie, to assist performers in bringing structural change to the industry. Let's talk about it now with Jack Devnarain, who is the chairperson of SAGA. Good morning, Jack. Thanks for being with us today. We saw your impassioned videos. You have for a long time been championing the cause of performers and other players in the South African entertainment industry. But one of the things you talk about in these letters that you have written is this culture in the creative industry, an unregulated sector, which renders freelancers, particularly those who are disadvantaged, vulnerable to unethical and abusive labour practices. Obviously, a case in point would be the issue of non-payment. So let's start off by talking about how endemic this is and what other abuses you're talking about.
We have a creative sector, as I mentioned, that's unregulated. And what does that mean? I think people take for granted the regime within which you can engage in a contractual relationship with your employer. So people take that as, I'm working for this person, what are my rights? And if you walk into most workplaces, you'll see up on the walls, there's your basic conditions of employment, employment equity, national minimum wage. All those rules are laid out. There's a fantastic, very progressive suite of labor laws that protect employees. And that's the difference, because as a freelancer, it means you are specifically excluded by those labor laws, which means as actors, we can't form a union, we can't engage in collective bargaining, we don't have protection, we don't have recourse to the CCMA or to labor court. And that's what creates a system within which people can perpetrate abuse and exploitation without recourse. You don't have the opportunity to say, I'm going to go on strike, I'm going to go on tools down, I'm going to take you to the CCMA, because you literally can't.
It's so interesting because I'm thinking about other vulnerable workers, and what comes to mind would be, you know, temporary piece job workers.
Yeah.
It would be domestic workers as well. And I've seen cases where domestic workers can go to the CCMA. Sometimes they don't even have a written contract. But you're saying even that is not a place that you have recourse?
Well, that's correct. We don't, because we are seen as freelancers. You'd sign a freelance agreement, and that specifically places you within a certain part of the labor market. That places you as an atypical worker. Whereas, for example, if you have to compare that with domestic workers, they would be seen as employees working within a certain fixed term arrangement. So being freelancers means that we are vulnerable to exploitation, because, as we are seeing in the industry, as long as you're not breaking a rule, because the rules don't exist, you're not doing anything wrong.
So it might be a conversation we can also have with the CCMA on what you're describing now as being a blind spot or a deficiency.
Absolutely.
There are some bills on the table. So I'm thinking the Performers Protection Amendment Bill and the Copyright Amendment Bill, which from your vantage point could dramatically improve the livelihood or the experiences as well of the acting fraternity in South Africa. What are they and where are they now?
We're talking about the bills that will allow South African actors to have a statutory right to earn royalties. That's essentially why we've got the Performers Protection Amendment Bill. That's the bill that creates the royalty right. And then you have that linked to the Copyright Amendment Bill, and that's the one that allows us to create an organization to collect and disburse those royalties. That's why we've been fighting to get those bills passed. We've been pushing them through Parliament, and it's been a 7-year process, which is why we were deeply confused, upset, and even offended when Minister Gayton McKenzie went out on the 29th of August at his 2-day Bosbarat in Boksburg and said, I'm telling the President not to sign the bills. We have had no engagement with the Minister about that, and the reason that, whatever it might be, for him not to support actor royalties. What is the alternative? Why are you fighting a bill that was put into Parliament by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition? So this is one part of what it is we are trying to achieve, because royalties exist as a bigger conversation within a regulated industry. And ultimately, we're looking for royalties to be part of a regulated industry so that all the other rights are going to be protected as well.
So what would be the tenets then of that first piece of regulation that you're seeking?
Collective bargaining, the right to unionize, the right to align with international standard practices, which is unionizing, establishing collective bargaining. So what happens around the world is that actors like you and me will say, we appoint a representative at our union, and the union is going to carry our mandate into a collective bargaining environment, which is a multilateral negotiating forum where they will be engaging with the broadcasters and the producers and the streamers. And together that forum decides what should be a standard contract, what should be minimum rates for the next 4 years. And as we saw in the US last year, that there was an attempt using this forum to address the threat of artificial intelligence. Yeah. So it's an adaptive tool.
You're referring to the Screen Writers Guild.
That's right.
Strikes.
And the US, as you know, is the unionized environment.
Yeah. I'll come back to the minister in just a second because, you know, there was quite a robust, I want to use that word, engagement between yourself and him around these issues. But if we're thinking about it, I mean, who typically is your client or you know, clients for South Africa's acting and entertainment fraternities? Among them would be, you know, the public broadcaster. There would be other broadcasters as well. And when they don't pay, one imagines, you know, I mean, obviously there's a breach of contract there. You're saying that even if work is delivered and you're not paid, again, there is absolutely nothing you can do.
On the face of it, there would be a breach of contract. I would have signed an agreement with the producer, and the producer then engages me to deliver my performance. The contract, however, is drafted by the broadcaster. And the broadcaster typically would be the one who would be commissioning the work. They would be putting the money in the bank with the producer, and the producer would then pay me depending on how I deliver my work. But because the producer engages with me, you'll find that the broadcaster, whether you're talking about the SABC or ETV or Mnet or CakeNet, they all like to keep the production element at arm's length. They never get involved. So whatever happens on the ground to the actors, to the crew, to the background actors, the broadcasters refuse to engage, refuse to step in. They do not take responsibility. And what they would say is, well, I'm not a party to your contract.
Because they give this work to production companies and production houses.
That's correct. So if there is a breach of contract between the actor and the producer, those are the two who have to fight it out. So what opportunity do I have for recourse in case there's a breach of contract? Being a freelancer, it means I can't take it to the CCMA or to Labour Court. It means that in my contract I have provision for mediation and arbitration, but those costs fall to me. Even if I could get a lawyer to sue or to litigate for the breach of contract, we are literally talking about a 4-year lead time before I'm even able to bring this into court, regardless of the cost that might be involved.
The other area where, and it sounds like there are multiple disadvantages throughout the entire value chain when it comes to entertainment industry in South Africa, is around the power you could potentially have to define the terms and conditions of a contract.
Yeah.
Talk to us about some of the difficulties related to that.
It would be very easy for me to get my South African Guild of Actors together and say, hey guys, let us come up with a SAGA contract. Let's put our own terms and conditions. Let's put in our own rates, and let's put that out into the industry. If we do that outside of a collective bargaining environment, that is literally a violation of competition law. That is what you call price fixing. That is collusion. That is the behavior of a cartel. Which is why we are asking the Department of Employment and Labour, give us the right to collective bargaining so that we can have the same discussion but in a collective bargaining environment. So this is why the issue about developing standard contract is so critical. It's because no single entity, no single broadcaster or organization or guild can simply come out and say, I've developed the standard contract, start using this one from 2025.
Well, before we go to the impact then, the daily lived experience then of the creative industry in South Africa, let's talk about the responses from the various departments. We already dealt with the promulgation of those bills by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. I think it's now in the Constitutional Court.
That's correct. We're expecting a hearing in February.
Yeah. So that will be a really interesting one to
Yeah.
watch. And your stance is get this through. Don't
Absolutely.
oppose this.
Pass the bills. We want the Constitutional Court to support the rights of people with disabilities, blind people, people with visual impairments. All that is contained in the bills. The President is talking about certain constitutional conflicts. We believe that they have been resolved in the 7 years that they went through the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. We don't see those conflicts that the President is talking about. And we have grave concerns also that there are very powerful international lobbyists that are very sensitive to corporate profits and big commercial interests that are advising government, including the President himself, that the bills are not going to favour their interests. And we're afraid that that's what has been part of the delay.
I mean, that's concerning, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's come then to the minister. And we saw, in the old days, we called it a tour when it was still Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call it now in the days of X, but not necessarily a war. But
Yes.
the minister seemed to have been, upset, so to speak, by some of the things that you were saying yesterday and saying, I have met you. When I came into office, I listened, I promised to act. He talked about being invited to different things or whatever. In other words, trying to build this bridge between his department and yourselves and saying, why accuse us of silence? We will soon have solutions. What's your response to the minister's position on this? What would you have preferred to have seen to date?
An honest conversation, an honest consultation. If there is a person who is sick and they have an ailment that they wish to bring to the doctor, you'd expect that the doctor would want to know, what is this ailment about? How can I help you to resolve this? What treatment do you need? So we are asking for, it could be quite a technical discussion as well, because even the conversation that you and I are having right now sounds like an alien language to many people. You're going to get stuck in constitutional issues. You're going to get stuck in legal issues and labor law issues and contractual issues. We need to have a very simple conversation with the minister and to be able to explain in a very real sense the felt impact of what happens when people are not paid. Why do we find ourselves in a position where people are not paid? And this is not something to resolve on social media. We are simply saying we are messengers. Don't shoot the messenger. Listen to the message and work from there.
We did invite the minister, and sadly wasn't available in this round, but we will certainly try him again, and he has been willing in the past to engage,
yes,
so we'll try and set that up. I've got to come out of this, but just a really quick word on the impact to the creative industry with all of this.
You've come out of the festive season. People are looking at new school shoes, stationery, uniforms, school fees, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of people in the creative sector who are unable to afford that. Many of them still remain unpaid.